Hello, I'm Mike Cardis, and today I'm going to share with you a simple tool to begin to identify what's going on inside your environment and your workplace, how to understand those patterns, find the patterns, make sense of the patterns, and then put that back into some work task or action item for your team and yourself. So, we're going to walk through a method called Distinctive Working Well Small Improvements. I'm going to show you two different ways to use this. One's going to be as a team, and I'll show an example. The other one's going to be as an individual for yourself to begin saying, what happened today? What am I recognizing? What can I do tomorrow? And we've seen from challenges in the environment that as complexity or change or ambiguity increases, the need for more rapid check-ins, or we call it a faster cadence of discussions, is required. And also, this is a time when you have to be able to give your team and yourself simple tools, we call them heuristics or rules of thumb, to identify in real time what's working, what's not working, how can we improve it. You will have the packet and a copy of all these slides, and let's get to it. So to think through this today, we're going to frame it by saying that to better manage and understand your work and environment, you need to seek different patterns. And by patterns, what I mean are differences that make a difference. I understand right now that a lot is going on and change is happening. Yet, if we don't identify what is working inside this changes, and we cannot make time with our teams and ourselves to make sense and pick up on those unrecognized differences that make a difference, we're going to lose a lot of the efficiency, optimization, and better ways to handle complexity going forward. To make sense of this and make this work, the method I recommend, and I'm going to walk you guys through today, is this. It's called Distinctive Working Well Small Improvements. At the core, that's all that you're asking people to do is to go out in their environment, look for what's distinctive, what's working well, what small improvements can they do and can they put into practice. So in the beginning with the team process, I'll recommend that you do this with your team. I'll show you an example in about 3 slides of how we did this with a management team, and they captured every day for 3 weeks during the early COVID crisis. What is distinctive? What's working well? What small improvements? And then we transferred working well and small improvements into action items to improve the work and keep going forward. So to begin with, I'll break down what each column means. So distinctive are things that are distinctive about the work or this team does. Or if I'm going through my day today and I'm with, let's say, clients or people I serve or staff members, what things stand out to me as being distinctive, special, or unique? What makes the work we're doing different? In this current environment, what things are different today than yesterday? Working well, those are your standard parts. It says, inside the workplace, what things went relatively well? What do I want to preserve? What do I want to keep? What do I need to ensure is not forgotten about or missed? And the 100 days better, we say 100 days better, but sometimes, and I've been saying a lot lately in the columns, is just defining small improvements. Meaning, if we can make the day a little better, make the work a little better, make the impact better to a client, what would that look like? And back to this piece, these 3 major areas are really all you need to make sense of the patterns. So imagine that you have 5 staff members, and each day you ask staff members to take 3 to 5 minutes at the end of their day or after seeing a client or following a meeting or at the end of a work task to say, what was distinctive about this? What was unique or different about how I did this or the day's patterns? Did anything stand out that didn't seem normative to me or in the norm? And with the distinctive parts, you're trying to pull out what differences did I or the team notice that would probably go unrecognized or not seen going forward. With the working well, you're reinforcing the areas of the work that are going relatively well because you know that a lot of things are going pretty damn well. And if we don't recognize those parts, we may forget about them. And using solution focused language, we can begin to identify if things are working well, how do we amplify or do more of these things? And the final column folks fill out is the small improvements. What can be better? How can I change things? What improvements can we make? This might be systemic, organizational, or individual in the process and tasks. And what you're trying to do from these is to look for what we call patterns or clusters. So imagine, for example, that you're doing this with a group and you're gathering a bunch of ideas over a period of time. Or you're pulling your team together and you're consistently asking them these questions. This is how you create patterns, and the patterns will show you areas of focus on. Here's an example from an organization that I did. And I'm going to leave this screen and go to a second screen in one moment. But I want to explain that while this seems relatively simple, it's a super powerful process to do. Here's an example. We did this with a management team from a health and human service organization I'm working with. And for 2 weeks, I asked them to capture inside their daily process what was distinctive about the day, about the work, what was happening. And you can see here meetings held virtually, increased access to administration, working from home 3 days a week, lack of having a budget for their workplace because the changes were happening, registered services, technology, all these areas here we captured as distinctive. And we read this as a group. We got together, they completed the tasks separately. There was 5 of them. They each wrote down distinctive working well small improvements. They emailed me the lists, and I compiled them into this form. Things that are working well. This was really helpful when we walked through this as a team. This was nice for them to kind of talk about these pieces. It reinforced their ideas and their beliefs. So teamwork, working from home, policy changes, information sharing. Community was more focused on helping and learning about needs and typical. All these areas. And then in the small improvements, this gave us areas to look at to say if we can make things better, or as what sort of things that you're currently going on can make things better inside the workplace. This was the part that the director of the team found most useful. Is we can find in here consistent clusters or patterns of difference to say, we saw this multiple stuff happening. Let's transfer these into action items. So the small improvements, right? Automate more tasks, have virtual meetings, improve IT, increase funding to get agency-wide projects moving. I think the team could be better prepared to work from home and anticipate the project needs. These areas. Plan for fundraising the rest of 2020. These things all came up. And interestingly, once we gathered all the information put together, we then saw patterns. So I'll share with you this. So as we went through this, we gathered the small improvements. Next step is how do we begin to transfer the small improvements as a team into action items? And there's a form, and I'll walk you through the form, and I recommend you use it. You think about this, you go through the small improvements, and you begin to say, of these small improvements, which of these can we do with relatively little effort, little budget, but we know it'll make a difference? And you can categorize things. Small budget, small effort, big difference. And then you think about this. Think about you and your team are the resources for change and growth. Make sure you include other people that are part of this plan to make sense and move this forward. Think about how you notice progress. And this form I've used many times. I think it's very, very successful. You ask folks to answer these questions or to even write this down in the project planner project documents, right? What is our goal? What will it look like when our team has accomplished it? So let's say, for example, we need to improve interoperability of the IT team with the client teams that are now out there in the fields. Let's do that. That's a good pattern we may see from small improvements. What's our goal and what will it look like when our team has accomplished it? Write that down. Second question. How do we see this helping with the unique needs of our customers? I know inside your organization, you have unique customers and customers that have many needs and depend upon you to deliver quality services to them. So to begin to say, if we can improve interoperability between IT and programs or people who are out there in the field, how will that help our customers? What will that do for them? Third part, where will we begin? This is when you start saying from your small improvements, what will be the first visible steps to get this done? And you can break this down into small visible steps, talking about creating a charter, developing program plans. This all comes from your pattern recognition. Moving forward, with whom do we see ourselves collaborating and communicating to make this happen? Who are your stakeholders? What's your outreach plan? What can you put into place? Next, when? What time frame for the actions will we have set up? So those of you who have worked with me in the past know that when I define a goal is a what by when. We use the acronym QQTR. Q for quality, Q for quantity, T for time, T for time frame, and R for resources you have access to. So if we're going to improve the interoperability between IT and program staff, when? What's that time frame to have these actions set up? And finally, how will we communicate success? And these ideas are pulled from your small improvements in your pattern areas. This here is a way that we actually cluster the ideas. So what you can do is begin to sort of say, amongst the small improvements that we have listed with this management team, we clustered the ideas into similar groups called constraint mapping. It's a fancy way to say, of the small improvements, which ones can we do immediately? Meaning we can immediately do it with very little budget and we have the existing talents. We put these ideas here. From these ideas, we then allocated or asked people in the team to lead these project teams. Another way of clustering the groups is we put things into what's called complicated. This is saying, what expertise or further resources do we need? So for example, in some of the ideas, we needed IT, or we needed outside resources the team didn't currently have. We put those here. Another area are your more complex ones, your longer term tasks. Longer term tasks we put in the emergent practices, or this upper left column. Those are a challenging idea. And then here in the lower left, these are what we call chaos. These are the, oh no, what's going to happen if this happens again? And you'll see here, we need to get preparation underway for the second wave of COVID. And they prepared for that. So the idea is not to get so wrapped up in the idea or the constraining parts, but at the core of it is to use what's distinctive, what's working well, how can we improve things? And you as a manager to ask your team to gather these pieces. You can even gather them on your Zoom meetings or your GoToMeetings, whatever virtual format you use, you can gather them on. And then ask folks to share those ideas. And then you can cluster those and say, okay, so we have these small improvements. Why don't we get in small groups, use breakout rooms, use virtual technology to say, which of these are our priority? How can we cluster these? And then from clustering those, you see a pattern. And the pattern may point to a bigger issue, systemic, organizational, societal, and the pattern may point to relatively simple, small things you can do. And from this pattern, you're creating a cadence of saying, what was distinctive? What's working well? What can we improve? As you're doing that, people are sharing, identifying things to work on. The most important part is this: you have to do things and take action off those small improvements. You've been given an idea. If you don't take any action on those small improvements, you will stop getting ideas from your team. When somebody gives you feedback, you can take action on it. And if it's a cluster or a pattern, you can move forward on it. So finally, last piece I want to share is saying, how do we do this as an individual? And what you see here with my very messy handwriting is how I actually do this every day myself. Now, I know some of you are going to say, I don't have time for this. For me to list the following ideas, so you'll see here, and I have in my notebook, I create a 1, 2, 3 column paper. I just draw some lines. And one is distinctive. And I think, what was distinctive about today? What thing stood out to me as being useful or different, or things that I think about and go, you know what? This made today special or different. Middle column, I have working well. Again, I think about what sort of things did I do that went relatively well today. Sometimes, honestly, with me working well is just eating at normal times, or it's getting enough sleep, or it's just saying, hey, you know what? I exercised today. Because what you're trying to do, just like with your team, with yourself, you're trying to identify differences that matter to help you be more effective in your day. Because you have to take some active sense over what happens. And small improvements, I list down things that can make tomorrow better. Like you'll see here, for example, like eat healthier, go to bed earlier, meditate, right? Get some work done, ask more questions. So I do the same task every day. And it's a way to use the same pattern. So in closing, I just wanted to give you a simple tool. And we've seen with many teams I've worked with, from IT to healthcare to manufacturing, that to do the distinctive, what's working well, what are some small improvements, that creates a language or a frame. And the more there's complexity and chaos, the more you feel that things are out of control, the more we need a frame or something to lean into to be creative on top of. Plus, the 3 questions: what was distinctive about today, or distinctive about this team, or distinctive about the project we just did? People understand that. It's not confusing language. You're not using internal language. There's no acronyms. What was working well, or what is working well? People know what that means. These things are working relatively well. And how can we make things better? Those are things people already know. Those words are already there. So I recommend from that, you go out there, you ask your team, all right, so for the next 2 weeks, I'm going to ask each of you just to email me or add it to your project document. What was distinctive about your day? Inside the workday, what stood out? What was working well? What things went relatively well for you and the team? What can we do better? And then when you meet, ask people to share those things. The conversation and pulling at the differences that matter and sharing the small improvements will help you hear patterns. Also, if you don't want to do it as a team, that's okay. Try it by yourself. To take some time and to self reflect and to stop and start with distinctive. So, in my day today, what things were distinctive? What stood out to me? What did I see that was useful or different? How do I know this? What was working well, or what worked well? What is working well? In that column, write down, maybe you just ate food at normal time. Perhaps you went for a walk. Maybe you made time to contact workplace friends who you haven't talked to in a long time. By pulling those things out, you're putting inside your brain indicators of what's working well for you to repeat and do more of. That will help your overall general mood. It'll also build up your team's bank of trust. So when things are tough, you can pull on those things to use them. At the end, small improvements. If you're going to make things a little better, what do they look like? How do I do that? I highly recommend you try this. You can contact me, mike@mikecardas.com, or call me. Additionally, I'm going to share with you a content packet on distinctive working well small improvements. Thank you so much for your time. I hope this is useful. I highly recommend you try it. Have a wonderful day.